Yeah, this is John from All Points TV, and today we have as an in-house guest Connor Coyne. Welcome, Connor Coyne.
Thank you.
And Connor's a local person who is also an author, and you've made some significant, I'd say, advancements in a possible writing career. I mean, you've actually got published you have quite a few things published already, right?
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a few things out there.
Yeah, it's like you were also publishing an anthology from Picador Publishers, like an anthology they have of, was that one of the Rust Belt writers? Or?
Yeah. Belt Magazine put together a Flint anthology called Happy Anyway, and then later Picador picked up rights for a collection of essays from all the different Rust Belt anthologies, and they chose my essay, Bath Time, as one of those.
So that's significant right there, because I mean I remember I've had books from Picador. I mean they're actually out. I think originally they're launched I think in the United States in 1972, and they're doing imprint books of stuff that was published I think in the UK. Correct? Is that what they were?
I know they've been around a while actually. I don't know the fine print about them so much, but.
Yeah, see, I kind of glanced at it because I mean I've heard that name. I've seen the back on books. You know, I have probably 10,000 books, and I probably only read a portion of them. But you know, it's like it makes me feel good they're around and impresses the hell out of somebody. So anyway, we're here to talk about your book that this has already been released, right? Urbantasm, right?
That's right. Yeah, the first volume of 4.
Yeah, now that's interesting right there because you already have 4, and they're almost up. Are they all written already, or you have the concepts and?
They're all written, and they've all been revised several times. I'm working with an editor, preparing them for publication, so they're all in kind of different stages of editing.
So I mean, I think that's an amazing amount of work. I mean, that's what I've always kind of appreciated about writers. I have friends who are writers, and the ability to actually discipline yourself to put so many words on a page each day. I mean, to me that's a challenge. I can do it for like essays, research papers, stuff like that. I can get that done. I mean, I used to cover a lot of that. When I was in college, sometimes to do up to 2 research papers a week for a while because I was in classes that required a lot of reading, a lot of responses to it. So, but to sit down and have the sustained effort to actually. The energy, that's a lot of energy. I mean, a lot of discipline. And you have a family. How do you carry that out?
I mean, it's sort of like you can have time for your family and time for your writing and time for sleep, and you have to pick 2. So lots of times the sleep will be on the losing end of that equation, and then you just go for as long as you can, and then when you're utterly exhausted, you hit pause, get caught up on sleep for a few days, and then jump right back in. So it's not always the most sustainable lifestyle, but if you're creative and determined, you can get through it.
No, that's another thing is that is just something I just really have remarkable admiration for. Is anybody can have that sustained effort because we all get enthused about it, and we go back to, like you said, if you have a span of time and you go back to writing, it's like sometimes like. Did you ever look at something and say, what was I intending for this? Maybe the flow has been interrupted, and now that it's not so easy to pick it up, or do you actually put notes down and so you can pick up again? Do you?
I take a lot of notes and I outline extensively, sometimes for years before I actually get down to starting a story. So usually, if it's something that I'm not that excited about, something that it's not a commitment I want to make, I usually find out well before I get to the writing part, But yeah, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of stories and concepts that I've kind of started, and just you get to a point where you're like, this is not. I'm not excited enough about this to put 1,000 hours more of work into it, which is what it would require to be good.
Now, how old are you when you decided this is the route you want to take for life? I mean, I've heard people saying they wanted to do it and they just abandoned it because they realized the effort required. What kept you going on that, and when did you make your decision?
Well, I think when I was younger, like high school and college, I was hoping to go into theater, either directing or writing plays, and I kind of had a moment a couple years out of college where I realized I wasn't that much of a people person. Like I like people and all of that, but if you're in theater in any capacity, it's sort of relentlessly collaborative. There's very little of the work that you do not have to be deeply involved with other people. And of course, there's a lot of collaboration in writing and publishing too, but at least the writing part is a much more solitary activity. And I think I knew for a long time that I wanted to go into the arts, that I wanted to go into a creative field. But writing was something that I kind of realized after college. That was something creative that I did well and that worked well with my personality.
So you said a lot of times you had the ideas for books, or you also had something written down about for years. What the genesis of this current project, this current publication, Urbantasm, and the book 1, then there could be book 2, book 3, book 4, different subtitles, obviously. We're focusing on this one now, but how many years ago did you have the genesis for this, maybe the germ for this idea of this book came about?
So this one was really personal, and I actually started playing around with ideas for this around the time I was 16, so 1995, I suppose. I started really drafting it in late 1996 and had a complete draft before I went off to college in 97.
Okay, we'll pick up on that. Where'd you go to college at?
University of Chicago.
Oh, no, that's like, it's like, that was kind of, I was thinking maybe I don't know if you'd ever want to have had the ambition to go to that, there's an Iowa workshop, writer's workshop. I know a lot of people at the University of Michigan when I was there, a few of the professors had been part of that. So, but what program was that? I mean, were you in the writing program there? Or?
Well, they didn't really have a writing program, and their curriculum has changed a lot over the last 15, 20 years, I'd say. But actually, I was going there for theater, and they didn't really have a theater major either. You could go for sort of a related concentration. Mine was called General Studies in the Humanities, which, let me tell you, you put that on your resume and everybody is, really excited to hire you right there. But you had theater classes and you would be involved in productions and such at the same time. And there were people who went through that program who went on to do theater professionally. I wasn't involved in their creative writing. Their creative writing curriculum was not particularly developed at that time, especially at the undergraduate level. And that was something I was able to explore more in grad school.
And where'd you go to grad school at?
It was the New School in New York.
No, I have a friend who lives in New York who went there for a couple semesters. It's a totally private school, isn't it?
The New School? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think
it's quite expensive to go there.
Yes, it is. Yes, I joke with my wife that we'll be very lucky if we finish paying down our student loans before our daughters have student loans,
or your grandkids even.
Yeah. It's looking like that. That's really not an unrealistic scenario at all. New school, and that's interesting because I thought University of Chicago was very expensive. But that was subsidized to some extent by grants. Whereas, like with New School, I didn't really have the grants, so almost everything that I owe today is on New School.
Yeah, that's it's innovative, and I think they have their own YouTube channel where they actually release interviews and stuff where they have different symposiums and stuff. Yeah, I was subscribed to. I used to get them on a regular basis postings, but maybe they dropped me. I don't know. But anyway, it's like I think I still have the subscription on YouTube because I was interested and I saw when my friend told me about it. She went there, and so I went and searched it out, and I saw that they had this thing going on YouTube channel, so I subscribed. So they had a lot of authors and a lot of activists and stuff they were interviewing, and so I thought that was kind of intriguing, doing what I do here, so I thought that was kind of intriguing. So no, I have heard of that school though. It started, what is it? It was started by a bunch of people, I guess, what they considered to be hippies, and that's what they thought. That's what she described it as,
Yeah, I know. John Dewey was one of them, and he was major in sort of education reform. But initially, it was called the New School for Social Research, and so, that was sort of their focus was social psychology and sociology, and it was all these sort of social sciences. And then over time, they branched out into other areas and changed their name to the New School. But it used to confuse people a lot because they'd ask where I was going to school, and I'd say, the New School. Well, which New School? It's just called the New School. So the name was kind of... They were going through a major rebranding phase when I got there, and, had sort of unveiled a new logo and kind of like brought all of their buildings together and stuff.
So John Dewey, actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, he was connected to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and he and his family, his wife's family was from Fenton area.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The last name was Riggs, I think, because I remember this because social psychology was one of the systems I studied in a class over at U of M, Flint, and I remember the professor going over, Dr. Ralph Raffleson. He's gone now. I think he might have passed away now, but he was a phenomenal professor, and he taught that. And he actually, they lived in Fenton, though. The family lived in Fenton. So, and then he was connected for the University of Chicago for several years until he moved on to something else. And I guess that's where you're picking up is where he went to. So
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of intriguing there because he's been he was very seminal in American educational scene for still is. I mean, still is. You know, so I mean, that was just interesting though. So let's go into this. I just got the book and you walked in. I was trying to read a little bit online because you do have the you do have your website too. We have that scrolling right there. It's from what I read is very readable. I mean, very quickly. I mean, very easy to get into, and that's an obstacle that a lot of authors have a tendency not to be able to overcome. You know, people have a resistance, or you got to hook people. You got to get them interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people don't do that. You did. What I mean, is this like this is based upon your life here in Flint, correct? Or
Yeah. Although I think in a lot of ways, and this is something which I have to particularly clarify when I'm talking about it with people who are not from the Flint area or not familiar. I'd say it's almost sort of it's almost based on things I've witnessed or been sort of tangent to, been adjacent to. Because a lot. I was very lucky to grow up in a stable home, and my dad was employed by the shop all the way up until up until he retired, and I think well after the year 2000, and I think it was like 2005 or something. And they were able to say to me, like, you get the grades, you go to college, and so I kind of was one of the last generations sort of moving through where I could kind of reap the benefits of all of these decades of prosperity here. But that wasn't true for many friends of mine. And, a lot of them were going through some really messed up stuff, in high school in particular. And so that kind of was what gave me the idea for the book and kind of kept fueling my desire to work on it for all those years.
so, yeah, I mean, it's like, would you like to maybe read a passage that you find really, would you want to put out there? Do you want people to actually hear something of that? I mean, because what I read is kind of intriguing. It was just, okay, I could get into this. I can get into this.
How? What's the policy on swearing?
That's like this is going up on YouTube, and you can keep it. Well, it's going up on also on public access, so you might want to you might go bleep yourself, I guess. But
I have a passage that I think will work. I just need to find where the page of it is. And all right, I think I got it. Yeah. So the main character is John. He's 13 years old in this story, and he lives in this is in a fictitious city called Akawe, but it's very very obviously modeled on Flint. He's from a long line of auto workers in his family, and it's set in 1993. And so this is a chapter early on, and kind of a flashback that he is having. There's a small cuckoo clock. On our bookshelf it stands, and it points to the time with its two little hands, and may I, like the clock, have my face clean and bright, and a bird in my breast, keeping watch through the night. When I was three, almost 4, my Aunt Ellie went into the hospital for the last time. The cancer had spread throughout her body by then, from the tips of my fingers to the nubs of my toes, she'd said with a merry laugh. And then things had changed around my house. My mother smoked cigarette after cigarette, fidgeting as she lit up, and whenever she spoke to me, she sounded annoyed, like if I was climbing onto the piano or standing on the coffee table. My father was worse. He sneezed all day long, red-faced, then he stayed up all night watching boxing on TV. The next morning, he'd be up again, sneezing and pouring water into his coffee from a big glass bottle. "What's wrong with Mark?" I had asked my mother. "What's wrong with your dad, you mean?" my mother said. "With Dad." "He's sad." "Well, what's he sad for?" He's sad because he thinks his sister is going to die. Aunt Ellie. They love each other very much, and he's sad because she's very sick." "Sick with a cold?" It's like, and her voice trailed off. Aha, I thought. I see. I get it. Sick like Timothy Brisby. An accident like Wile E. Coyote's. A death like Casper's. Not much to worry about because it's going to be okay. She told me so herself. She'd told me so many times. I couldn't imagine death. All I could think of was the pleasure of the present and the exciting future, climbing on the playground with my friends, getting to stay up and watch a movie, opening presents on my birthday. See, every day was a chance to become something new. An astronaut, a dinosaur, an auto worker like my dad, and I would never run out of days, and I would never run out of becomings. And so, on the wonderful night when my Aunt Ellie was finally going to die, my grandmother Richter came over to pick me up. My parents were leaving for the hospital, and I had my jams and my pillow and my toy airplane ready to take the ride out to the suburbs. An overnight visit. I had climbed into my grandmother's car, into the booster seat, and my mother fastened the seatbelt across my lap. Grandmother Richter drove out past the Temple Medical Center, an alabaster tower ringed with blue neon bands at top. And in one of its higher rooms, I later heard, my Aunt Ellie had turned her eyes out the window and mistook the glowing neon for the lambent aurora that had danced out over Alaska on her honeymoon 16 years before. 100 feet below, my grandmother and I hurried out into Arcadia, where the sweet and bitter scent of coffee and hot donuts for the third shift factory workers, and the rolling hills with their hundreds of porch lights shining off brick tiles on terraced lots, and the dull red beacons winking from the top of radio towers on the hazy horizon, and the river riding black and fast with mane of foam, and the festooned constellations, the enemy stars, the waving trees, and a gospel song rattling through the dashboard radio. This world is not my home. It all merged together into a promise that this is a world without end, that this is a life full of joy, this city is alive, and it goes on forever. Even after we had arrived at my grandparents' tiny house, and I had brushed my teeth and lay down on the pull-out couch in the living room with my little airplane and the amber-colored nightlight, I thrilled with it all. I trembled at that unfolding. I marveled at the splendor and the luminescence of the universe, even as one of my father's bright stars went out forever.
That's amazing. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, that's like so rich in detail. Like all these thoughts. I mean, that's how humans think. I mean, all that stuff goes on in the head, a person's head. I mean, you have so many thoughts conjoined and separated, and yet pulled back together. I mean, I would say that was brilliant. I mean, everything you do. I mean,
you.
very impressed by you on that. I mean, it's just that takes. Did you develop that over a while? That talent? Did you get all that in there?
I mean, it takes a really, really long time, and I think that's one thing. You know, I think anybody can write a book. I think almost anybody can with the proper practice and exposure and teaching, write a book well. It's not sort of it's not an exclusive talent, but I do think what people often underestimate is how difficult it is to write well. Language interacts with our brains in different ways based on whether it's on the page or whether it's conversational. And to learn how to write, you really have to understand sort of the frisson or the chemistry going on between thoughts that you have, the way you communicate them, and the way they're received and interpreted by your readers.
So, I mean, I think I'm just really impressed by it because, I mean, we not obviously we're not going to have the same experiences that character did.
Yeah.
But there's so many things that we have like asides, we have things that are tied together, and it all isn't significant to us, and we have to express that. And that was just brilliant, Don, the way you did that with that character. I mean,
thank you.
Now, okay, the name for the series, Urbantasm, is that like a play on phantasm or?
Yeah.
Yeah, because basically it is kind of a reality is kind of like it's kind of a mixture of rawness and beauty, horror and loveliness. It's like it's all intertwined. Like you're talking about, the imagery in that passage you just read. I mean, there's so much going on, and there's also a child who would actually be able to be able to recall that much at such an early age. That kind of shows that character is really maybe he's above his peers. I would say because he's got so much and he's able to recall that. I just think it was a great passage. Yeah. We'll go into the Urbantasm. I mean, how did you come up with that? I mean,
I mean, it was kind of like low hanging fruit at first because my brother was reading Phantasmagoria by Lewis Carroll when I started this, and it was just sort of a portmanteau of those two different words. And I've never read that book, but I just thought, that the words urban, relating to cities, and phantom is really relating to ghosts, had some interesting play off of each other, and combining that into a word, a single word, that would provide a whole novel's worth of ideas worth exploring. What's interesting though is that I kind of like chose the title almost kind of flippantly, just like, oh, that's cool, but as I've worked on the book and have experienced the last 40 years of Flint's history, and then have also gotten to experience some other cities. I lived in both New York and Chicago for a while. There is, I think, this sense that the history of a city is something which exerts an influence on its present, and especially in a city that has contracted rapidly as Flint has, you almost kind of see ghosts walking around. You see the ghosts of buildings that have been abandoned or demolished, or you see the ghosts of people who used to live here and have moved. So the title, almost kind of by accident, became much more poignant and relevant than I kind of expected it to be.
No, I can see that. I mean, it's like, I'm thinking too. I remember reading about, I don't know if you ever read the writings of Isaac Bashevis Singer. He won the Nobel Prize, I think it was 1978.
Okay.
Anyway, he was a Yiddish writer who came to the United States in his 30s, maybe early 40s. So he was during, after the Second World War, the Holocaust and all that. He was a Jewish and Yiddish writer, and wrote in Yiddish rather. And he said Yiddish was a great language to write about ghosts because it is a dead language. And and they're always lamenting. The Jewish writers at that time were always lamenting the demise, or what they saw as the impending demise in Yiddish. I don't think that's fully occurred yet, but I think that there's a kind of a kinship to, if you live here in Flint. I mean, we have to look backwards so many years to actually see our heyday, and see the visages that the traces of the visages. I mean, you see that you could see the opulence of some of the homes that are still around here. The opulence must have existed because they were brick mansions, 3 stories tall, with iron fences around them, and that was all measures of visible measures of considerable wealth. So I mean, it's. I think it is a ghost town. It's like a lingering ghost town. It's almost like one that's still writhing in some kind of agony or something like that. And it's, man, if anybody hearing this and not from Flint is probably going to say, well, we're staying hell away from Flint. But I mean, but there's a beauty to it. There's also a sadness to it. And I can see that captures that.
It's so paradoxical because and actually like that kind of actually comes into the title here, the subtitle, this is Book 1, The Dying City. And I think, I don't know what people necessarily think when they see that, but what I'm hoping they're wondering is that meant to be a sarcastic title or not? Because, on the one hand, as with Flint, the descriptions are all packed full of, images that suggest like dying or death or decay, a kind of a winding down of the gears. And yet at the same time, the people and the characters are very much filled with life, and they feel passion and curiosity and fear and anxiety and excitement about their own experiences. Can a city be dead or dying if it's filled with if the people within it are full of life? And I think that's worth playing with. What makes a city a city? Is it a collection of buildings or is it a collection of people? I don't think that there's a right answer, but but choosing one of those answers, even if temporarily, kind of leads you to different interpretations about how we interact with cities.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I think that's very good. Those are good valid points. Flint. Yeah, Flint's like that's all I've ever known. But I've also been to Chicago. I've been to Toronto. Great city, by the way. Toronto was back, especially when I was there. It was in the 80s. It's cities like it is hard to say what part is actually more of a contributing factor. Is it I would have to say all of it's connected to humans because the architecture, the buildings, the designs, everything is all human generated. Yeah, it doesn't occur naturally. And every city's got its own pulse. Every city's got its own there's a subcultures. There's people you simply want to avoid in every culture, every city. I mean, there's groups of people you don't want anything to do with. There's some people you find fascinating and compelling, but they're distant. How would you the people the bulk of your characters, since I haven't read any, are they probably from like the factory workers background and watching everything decay and fall apart? And
I mean, it's kind of a cross section of, or I guess their backgrounds would have been as much a cross section of people that I had known back when sort of the story was generated. So the 90s, I would say. Some of them, have a background in, the shop, generations going back within their family. Some of them, not so much either. They've been in sort of like members of like the poor underclass for generations. Most of the people that kind of inspired this book, would have gone to the Flint schools, and so you really do find kind of a cross section, as it would have seemed in the 1990s. And I think that that's actually a point of tension that outsiders probably don't catch as much, but that's familiar to people here, is that, even within a community that we see as being poor, like Flint, there's still different tiers and different experiences that, if you had a parent who worked for General Motors, in the 80s or the 90s, your neighborhood might be really struggling and kind of coming apart at the seams, but your parents are still bringing home that 50, 60,000 whatever paycheck a year, and that made a really meaningful difference for people in those families.
See, that's another thing. I've seen right where the studio's at now. Still here, right across the river from it was Buick, what we call Buick. They was called Buick City, and up to the east of this place was AC, which is neither one of them are here yet. Still they've been demolished. And I remember I used to tell people I grew up between the smokestacks of Buick and AC, and my dad wasn't a factory worker, and there is you're talking about like almost like a stratification or kind of layers. When your family's not employed by General Motors and you're not members of the UAW, you're the odd people out. So there's kind of like a subclass, subset, whatever within that, even though this is a shop town. And that's the thing is how we use shop. Most people hear the shop and they think it's like a store. Yeah. And then we said, then they said, what kind of shop is it? Well, then they find out it's a factory. Well, why don't you say it's a factory? And I was like, because it's always been called shops. We always call them shops. That's it was a workshop. I guess that's shortening of workshop. But
I have a friend who's I have a good friend who's a writer based in Detroit. She's from Flint originally, and she had recently submitted a piece to a literary magazine, and they rejected it, and they said that the fact that she used the word shop rat was insulting to the people of Flint. They had this sort of like outsider view where it would be seen as like, I don't know, condescending or something. Whereas of course that's part of the parlance here. I mean, if your parents a shop rat if they put in that time at GM. So I thought that was kind of a weird moment of like dislocation between the way that editor was reading it and clearly the way she intended it herself.
So I had a friend whose father had worked on the line for years, and then he got a chance to go to, back then it was GMI, and he went there, and then afterwards his wife would took real serious umbrage if you referred to him as a shop rat. Yeah. Because he had this education. Well, and my friend was bringing this up because it was his ex-fiance. He said, man, so-and-so's mom really got mad at me when I brought up, I called her husband a shop rat. We're not a shop rat. He went to GMI. Well, you see, right there is a distinction, even though his initial starting out point for being in the factories was a line worker, aka shop rat. And but as soon as he reached that one point where he actually had the education, they want to drop that. Yeah. So there's a pecking order within there's pecking orders within the factories. I mean, if you were foundry was considered a hot, dirty job, it was undesirable. People who worked there were considered beneath other people.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a pecking order within that. So now my family, like I said, I had uncles and stuff that worked, for the factories here and there, but my dad didn't. He worked for the post office. He was one of those people who went postal. No, he never went postal. But there is it's definitely a blue collar town. It's definitely you have white collar and you have blue collar, and the white collar is still a demarked, very strong demarcation point, us and them. I still think that exists now, from what I've seen. Anyway, this really sounds a treat. Now, how many characters would you say are in this first part of the novel?
In the first novel, I'd say there's probably a dozen or so characters that a reader is going to need to like, really pay close attention to, that sort of dominate the storyline. But it's a big cast, and there are people that are actually like brought up kind of fleetingly now that will become significant later on. And then there are just cases where you need to give a character a name. All of John's teachers kind of come up in various contexts, and so they all get mentioned by somewhat. But I'd say that the main core of the story comes down to 12, 15 or so people.
So that's quite a few people. I mean, it's quite a few people, and I would think that would demonstrate it probably has a pretty involved storyline.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot going on. I'd say in terms of the plot being a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, that's hard. That's also hard for the writer to keep going. Continuity. I mean, especially when you got spread out, you're gonna have to probably go back and check. Okay, did this character now do this, and it wasn't possible for this person to do this? You have to check for continuity, probably, wouldn't you? Or
well, yeah, it's one of the luxuries of working on something for this long, because I have had that problem more with other things I've written. Is you get to know the book about as familiarly as you know your own street. So I don't have to sort of check, okay, there's that guy way down on the right who never gets his trash out to the curb, or there's such and such a dead tree that I'm waiting for the city to take down, or whatever. It's my neighborhood. I know it really well, and I'm kind of have that level of familiarity with this book. That said, I teach creative writing students at the Flint Public Library, and one thing I always try to get through to them is the importance of outlining. And, every writer has a slightly different attitude toward outlining, but if you want a plot that's going to confound a reader or get somebody scratching their head or wondering what's going to happen next, if you want a plot with complexity to it, you need to sit down and write an outline and understand thoroughly how all those parts fit together before you're totally in the thick of it, because otherwise it's almost inevitable that you're going to contradict yourself. And people will be really frustrated if they invest all the time and energy in understanding this wonderful story you've set up for them if, it doesn't make sense at the end.
Yeah, that's I would say too, especially when you're going to have it over a series of 4 books. And are some of these characters, are they going to mature and grow and get married and stuff? And how long of a span would these books be planned to cover? These 4 books, are there 5 years, 10 years, 25 years? What?
About 4 years. I'd say the main storyline starts in 1993, and by the end of the 4th book, you're up to 1996. So you're seeing about 3 or 4 years in the life of these characters in this city.
See, I always thought that was kind of you see a TV series. The one I can think come to mind would be the Waltons. I don't know if you were familiar with the Waltons. You're quite a bit younger than I am. But there was development. The thing is, they had a lot of interesting plots. But and some people say, well, nobody has that interest in a life. But if you actually look at this as a real family, there's going to be several days where you're not viewing them. Okay, you're not seeing them, and they're probably just as banal as the rest of our lives. But it was really set, and I thought it was well done. The series is well done. I mean, some people, when the series got older, they said they jumped the shark, and brought in newer children and stuff to basically keep the storyline going. And that might have been to a stretch, but I just think overall the stories were actually very believable for that era and for those people. I mean, and I was very impressed by that, the development of those characters. Now, some people you'll take several people they have some people in their mind, and they extract certain attributes of these people and they put together as one person.
Yeah.
And is that what you do as well? Is certain maybe you heard a dialogue and you put now you create a character based upon what they said in this dialogue. That maybe a snippet of one in reality. Is something you develop something like that too, or?
Definitely. And it's and every book is a little bit different, but with this one in particular, because some of these characters, go through some very vulnerable moments, which the book presents, and also sometimes the characters behave in very, very dislikable ways. I really wanted to kind of protect the privacy of the people that it was based around. Flint's not that big of a town in some ways. And so I worked hard to try to create kind of composite characters. So the idea is, and with I think kind of mixed results, but once you incorporate, you take like a little bit from person A and a little bit from person B, and develop a situation, and at some point the character kind of springs to life as an individual in your mind, and they are no longer based upon anybody in real life. They're their own creation. But that still originates in things you've experienced and heard, and it could be something as prosaic as I've been sitting, I can't tell you how many dialogues sent with I overheard something kind of juicy while I'm like sitting at the Atlas or something, and I'm like, I got to write that down because I'm totally going to use that. All the way to people that I've been friends with for decades, and I've seen their growth and I've seen their struggle, and you still want to create like a separate identity, a separate life in the story, but I don't think it's really possible to excise your own experience from your own writing, and that includes the people that you interact with.
Now, I'm going to ask you, and I hope I'm not giving too much away. I saw something on Facebook today that said from your Facebook page, and you said they actually had come up with a playlist of these different characters. Now, I think that was really, I have never heard of an author doing that. I think they might, now, with TV series they've done, like Walking Dead, I guess they play music along with some of the characters that might have been connected to that character. But I've never heard of an author actually creating a playlist of music we've all heard, not stuff that's all fictionalized. This is like a playlist of bands that we've probably all heard of.
Yeah.
That's intriguing. That's an intriguing thing to do.
Thank you. Well, it was kind of like something that I was just thinking of for fun. And, in terms of like marketing the book and making kind of the time period which it's set more accessible to people, that was something that we wanted to play with. There's already a playlist up there, and it's sort of a soundtrack to book one. And the music that these characters are listening to is very, very prominent, in the book. There's a lot of discussion of music and stuff like that. So especially for younger readers, they're not going to necessarily be familiar with what kids were listening to and, way back in 1993. So we put up a playlist on YouTube and Spotify of like 16 or so songs, that these characters would have been listening to. But I guess what I thought would be fun now would be for each of the actual characters, what would they put on a mixtape? John is the main character. What would he put on a mixtape? What would his friend Quanla put on a mixtape? What would Adam, who's sort of like, kind of getting into hip hop, like what would his mixtape sound like? So I think it's going to be fun to kind of put that together and probably put that on YouTube in the next week or so.
So that was intriguing. I saw that just before you came in today, and I was like, wow, I got to ask him about this because I love some of the movies that came about in the 80s. I mean, John Hughes, because the soundtrack was so impressive in the many songs. And you also look at the movie Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It was they all had soundtracks that were just impressive. I mean, what was the other one that I can't? There are other movie that I'm thinking of too. I can't think of the name of it, but the soundtrack again was something that was kind of drove the storyline. It was tied to it.
Yeah.
I grew up in the '70s, and I mean, let's face it, the Eagles are prominent. In the South, everybody knew that the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah.
If I were to ever write a story about junior high and high school years, those songs they weren't just something incidental. They were the soundtrack of my existence at that point. I mean? So I just thought that was really intriguing because this bring fullness. I mean, you actually not only sketch these people out, but now you're seeing what's actually ties them emotionally, what's tied to them emotionally. I think that by doing that,
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember, and I guess I was a little bit older than the characters in this book when I had these conversations, but when I got to be like in high school, like 9th or 10th grade, the bands that you listened to, the music that you listened to, that was like the first item you had to like check off when you got to know who somebody was, and what band do you listen to, and it seems silly in retrospect, but if you listen to Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins or Nine Inch Nails or whatever, it was important that you kind of like diss on like the other bands that they weren't as good, they were inferior. Well, how can you listen to that crap? Whereas you look at it, you look back on it, and these are musical genres where there's a lot of exchange and borrowing. So if you enjoy the music of one person or one band, you're likely to find things that you enjoy in the others. But at the time, it was a way of kind of defining the group or the clique or who you were friends with. And in the book, it's kind of it
this kind of happened incidentally, but I think it worked out really well, is John's family is really into jazz music. Like his father is like a really, really big fan of bop era jazz. And so that's the music that John is mostly familiar with. So when he goes to junior high school, just about all of his friends and the strangers that he's meeting, they're all listening to like hip hop, they're all listening to alternative music. And he kind of gets to discover how important this is to them, which is, as a writer, a really convenient way to talk about it, because if he's discovering it, then it's an opportunity to kind of introduce readers to it at the same time.
Yeah, that's intriguing, because I had a similar experience, because my dad was a big into the big band music and marching band. I mean, he was in the Shrine Band when he was younger, unofficially, of course. But and also later on when he became a Shriner, he was in that, and that was a big part of his life. Well, I heard all that stuff. We used to have all the big band music and stuff on records. When I went to junior high, I was kind of put off by hearing some of the music, because a lot of it was just too loud and too chaotic. So I mean, I didn't like it, but. When I heard bands like definitely the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, there's the lyrics. I like the stuff that was always lyrically, long, strong component. So, but that's intriguing. Doing this though, when you're doing these kind of like creating basically the soundtrack for these individual characters, it would lend itself easily to help pull these together for movies or maybe a TV series. Because I mean that'd be ambitious, but that'd be so cool if you could do something like that. Bring all these characters together and actually get actors to depict them, and and I think it sound like the germ of an idea for a great TV series, maybe on something like HBO or something. Because I mean, there's a rawness you probably won't know. I mean, let's face it, the characters in Flint, it'd be awfully hard to write for the characters of Flint without having swear words. And even today, they still have some big issues on network television about swearing. Yeah. And let's face it, it was common. I mean, it's a very crass, I guess some people's eyes, very crass and vulgar way of speaking. But it was a huge component of what you heard every day.
I queried 250 literary agents and small publishers about this book, and I was submitting it as either literary fiction or young adult fiction, because any publisher, any agent, they want the genre, and they have very, very fixed and rigid definitions of what genre it should fall in, and yet this book, for various reasons, fell into it kind of straddled both. But the biggest objection that I found from both agents and publishers of young adult fiction was the swearing, and I found that really kind of a little depressing, but surprising, because in this book there are characters who are essentially homeless. There are like teenagers, like 12, 13-year-olds. There are people growing up in crack houses. There are people who are dealing with all sorts of messed up situations, and there's a lot of homophobia, and there's a lot of misogyny, and just some really gross things that these characters are like going through. And I didn't hear I heard no objection about any of that. But the idea that somebody who's 16 years old and is walking through a high school and hearing these words multiple times every day is going to F dash 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 is going to like cross some sort of a line and spoil their perfect innocence. I was staggered that would be the main thing they would object to.
Well, like South Park. I mean, those characters. I mean, my friend watched South Park. I didn't too, much later. Yeah. And I just saw some episodes of it. Those kids swore a lot, but guess what? I was a 4th and 5th grader using that kind of language. Yeah. I'm not ashamed to say it. Right. I'm not proud of it. Yeah. But let's face it, when your adults are around, you're swearing, and everybody else around you is swearing. And I think it's just. I mean. I don't like people who are full-of jerks. Everything out of them is like a swear word, or cursing at you and all that, or belligerence or hostility. Yeah. But we are created by a pornographic act, okay? And it seems like people can't get over the fact that they want this antiseptic world. It simply never existed. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've always had problems with.
Well, I just think, it's one of the ways, it's one of the most accessible ways for young people to practice at being adult. There are all these things that young people can do
to, have a more adult experience and to begin that journey into adulthood. And most of them have consequences, and some of them, the consequences are really dire. If you jump behind the wheel of a car without knowing how to drive, it could have really, really horrible consequences. But the thing about swearing is what's the consequence? You get in trouble. That's the bad consequence. So I do think that, it's something that almost everybody does, and most of us, start swearing at a relatively young age, and I don't know anybody who, that's the worst thing that they've heard. So yeah, I don't think this book could stand without incorporating that aspect of the language. It's part of these characters' experience of each other. It wouldn't be rich or accurate if it wasn't there.
See, I was an urban kid, so I mean, I had friends that lived in suburbia, but I don't think they were, so antiseptic in their speech either. I mean, I think it was very. It's one of those. It's weird. We don't want to admit the very obvious. Okay, people swear.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of weird. I try to avoid it because this stuff goes up on YouTube's not an issue, but when you go up to like public access,
right,
they might balk at if they have somebody sounding foul all the time. But
yeah,
so I try to watch it, and which is very hard because I swore like a sailor. I mean, in personal life, I mean, one of my friend's sisters, she was talking to me. She was telling her friend afterward, her sister afterwards. He just said, the F word, and he's like, so casually, and she was so shocked by that. I mean, it's like I'm thinking, well, I'm past the age of 5,
yeah.
So I mean, and I don't like swearing. I don't, but it become ingrained. I try to penalize myself, but anyway, that's a side point. But the thing is, there's a rawness to human existence that a lot of people, you're almost like prohibited from exploring. I mean, nowadays it's sexuality, but that still can't be. You can't, as long as you don't say that F word during the process of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just think that's bizarre. I really do. So, I mean, I think it's kind of an artistic impingement too, or impediment rather. I mean, to put those kind of strictures.
Yeah, and usually, I don't make an issue of it if there's no need for it to be an issue. Like, I've certainly, read things where an editor, a publisher has been like, you can tone this down. There's really no reason not to. And, when that's possible, when I don't think that, the message or the veracity of what I'm trying to write is, I try to be accommodating. I mean, you want people to read you and understand you. If you're putting up barriers to being read and understood that are silly or arbitrary, then then more people aren't going to hear what you think is important to hear. But the other side of it would be this, which is, going back to that dynamic that some of these characters have an experience that is more of the street, and some of them have a more, mainstream American experience. Well, if you're in that latter group and you want to feel an affinity or a closeness to your friends, who are from a much dicier home situation or something, you can swear. You can show that you are comfortable with that straight language. You can share that you know the lyrics to all the same songs and that you're comfortable bandying that about. That's a way that you can commune with your friends when there are other ways that you can't. So I think to leave that out would be leaving something essential out of the dynamics between these young people.
It just basically makes it more, I would say, it just basically makes more real, more believable, basically like something that can walk off that page, those pages. I mean, that's what I would come across to me because, life is a raw process. I mean, let's face it. It's like St. Augustine once said, made them a remark that we're born between feces and urine. That's very inauspicious. That's not very pleasant. It's not very elegant.
Yeah.
I mean, and if anybody wants to get the imagery and get disgusted by it, go ahead, because it is kind of disgusting. Humans are disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, Gene Simmons one time was in an interview talking about this is going to be considered misogynist now, but this is in the 90s, and he said it was in an interview in Playboy. He said that he didn't think women could be really effective rock and rollers because they couldn't admit to themselves which part of them stank. Okay, which is ironic because he was actually a producer for Lita Ford. But anyway, that's beside the point. But he's got a point there. I mean, sometimes there's certain types of endeavors. It actually has to be connected to the rawness of being a human. That's a simple fact. But anyway, now these series of books these are self-published, right?
Yeah, it's a bit of a different deal than I did before because these have financing. I have a producer who is, basically taking care of the financial expense, whereas with other books that I've self-published, it's either been I just would pay out of pocket, or I've used crowdfunding to do that. But yeah, it is self-published. It's specifically published through Gothic Funk Press, which is a sole proprietorship that also does sort of community engagement and youth counseling and things, youth writing counseling. But yeah, the press is essentially my personal business. So this is a self-published book.
And that's really good. I mean, because I've a lot of self-publisher people. I mean, some people want to kind of look down on that, but some people like such literary geniuses like Nabokov. I don't know if you knew this. Actually, initially was self-published.
Oh, I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, he was. Nabokov was. Yeah, because he too couldn't find a publisher. So he was self. And that's what I remember reading that in the. I think it was in the blurb of the book. The Lolita.
Yeah.
Actually, and I also read up on him. I mean, he's a brilliant man. He spoke 3 different languages, fluently, English, Russian, and French. So I mean, and here, people struggle to write in English, and that's their native language. This man was a virtuoso in all these languages. So I mean, I don't know if you ever read anything by Nabokov, but he's just an amazing writer. I'm a lifelong speaker of English, and I got to scramble to a dictionary. What? Well, that's what that means. So I mean, he's an amazing writer. So I mean, if somebody wants to get these books for the kids, would you say would you give them any kind of provacios or any kind of caveats or whatever, or what?
For younger readers?
Yes.
I mean, my daughter has watched me working on this pretty much as long as she can remember, and so she's asked when she can read it, and I've said about 10th grade. That everybody's going to have a slightly different comfort level on that. I think a 10th grader can handle anything that's in here. But I'd say the main thing, and this is something that, I just think for me with my daughter is a lot of fun, is, usually I read books alongside her. And it certainly is never with the idea of saying, okay, this is too gross or whatever for you. But if there's something that concerns me or something that I want to qualify or discuss with her, then I'm familiar with the material, so I can say, hey, they're talking about suicide in this chapter, or they're talking about homelessness, or whatever. Then I can be part of her experience of that literature, and I think that a lot of times, I do think there is a tendency to underestimate the sophistication of young readers and their abilities to draw their own intellectual or moral conclusions about what they are reading. But I also think that literature is at its richest when we experience it as part of a conversation with other people. So I'm always, going to have a richer experience of a book. She's always going to have a richer experience of a book if we finish it and we sit down and we talk about what we liked or didn't like about it. And I think that, with a book like Urbantasm, which has got young people dealing with some really serious situations, I can't think of any problem that isn't fixed by sitting down and talking with your kid about it.
No, I think that's a healthy approach, and I think that's a healthy attitude. Like I said, my parents never tried to restrict me on what I was reading. I was reading some stuff that probably by all fair accounts I should never read, but I did, and because I was really I had a strong sense of curiosity, and also I grew up in Flint. Okay, I mean, they couldn't protect. My parents never tried to be overly protective. We had our rules. We knew what we couldn't do.
Yeah.
But we couldn't change the behavior of other people, so we didn't try to interfere.
Yeah.
They just did what they wanted to do, and it was a very interesting place to grow up, especially the East Side, right where we are now. It's like this is as basic as you can get. I mean, it's serious. There's no holds barred. There's nothing really considered totally taboo to discuss, to see. You don't never know what you're going to see. So even that was quite a bit like that when I was a kid, even.
Yeah.
So I mean, but I think you do your kid a service if you actually do try to protect them at a certain age. But after a certain age, if you still retain that, then you're probably doing them a great disservice.
Yeah.
Now, could you see like down the road somebody who wants to use these books in a school, maybe a high school, and it'd be a good. Would you like could you see yourself coming up with like a study guide or a discussion guide for these books?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah. I think that's been one of the fun things, but it's also one of the challenging things is, you have to cut things that you don't think serve the story. And I'm not as hung up as some writers are on, say what you say and get out of there. Like, I don't think anybody would accuse me of
of being too brief in the way I tell a story. But nevertheless, if something is not contributing to your story, if it's not helping move it along, you have to cut it. And in the case of Flint, because, a lot of this is also kind of a document of Flint's history in a sort of way, there's so much that can't make it in. There's so much really, really cool stuff. So something like a study guide is a great way to say, well, this it didn't make it into the novel. It's not part of the novel, but did you know this about this neighborhood or about this labor movement or whatever it is? I think that would be a really fun opportunity.
So I could see these books. I mean, when I'm hearing about these books, I could see them be also used for maybe down the road actually being a slice of like Americana that you'd want to study in a cultural history, a cultural studies class. Because, it's like either the music, there was alluded to, the current events around the city. It's not just about the city because nobody's like an island.
Right.
No city's an island.
Right.
Flint's actually been part of something, actually was a driving force for many years in different areas, in many different fields rather. This thing sounds very intriguing though, and I'm I'm excited to start reading in this book you got here. Anyway, we got it scrolling across the top here where they can reach you, and also you also are on Facebook, correct?
Yep.
And I also have the website for the book series, but you also have ConnorCoyne.com too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So so if somebody's local, maybe they want you to come out to do a speaker gig. Would you encourage them to also contact you there?
Yeah, that would be wonderful. My email address is connor@connorcoyne.com, connor@connorcoyne.com. And if you really go to any of those websites, they all kind of like link together. So whatever you're looking for, you'll find. But I'd say for anything relating to the book, we try to put everything up on that website as soon as we can, and that's where you'll find the playlists. We've got maps. We've got I actually recently finished a book tour, and there's a lot of information on sort of like how that went, and that was a really kind of cool experience, getting to travel around the country and read from the book and talk about the book. So just about everything about this project is at urbantasm.com.
That's great. And this sounds like a really intriguing series. I would encourage all of you out there who are hearing this interview to go and click on the link, go to order these books. And when is the second book going to be available?
Second book will be available in September.
Okay. And thank you for coming into the studio. It's always glad to talk to you. And I encourage you too, if there's anything you want to bring out non-literary connected, just contact me and we'll have you come back in. All right.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.